Abayawardana. You are joining us here today on another episode of Youth Lankans, hosted by the Sri Lankan's newspaper. Sri Lankan's newspaper is the only Sri Lankan community newspaper distributed throughout all the major cities of New Zealand. On this episode, we invited a special gentleman for the Sri Lankan community living in Auckland. He doesn't even need an introduction, but I would introduce him as a politician, an activist, a community representative, and even a farmer. So, joining us today is Suveen Walgampola, which I would define as a Kiwi youth leader of Sri Lankan origin. Suveen, thank you very much for taking some time off your schedule and joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, if you go to the very beginning,
Yeah.
so you came to New Zealand at a very young age.
Yep. In the bassinet.
Can you recall of any memories from Sri Lanka, and can you tell us a little bit about your family background?
Oh, so yeah. So, Ami being from Ratnapura. That's Ami's village. Tati is from Mirisa. So in terms of early memories, not a lot. I was in the bassinet, still a baby, 1 to 2 years old. And so therefore when I came and touched down in New Zealand, I guess the earliest memories is delivering papers. So back in those days, all the Sri Lankans had all the paper runs around Auckland. So I guess the earliest memories were the papers, and then in terms of back home, earliest memories back home would be staying with Atama in Ratmalana.
When you go there for holidays?
For holidays, so Ratmalana, Katandola in Ratnapura, and then Mirisa, Tati's people as well. Yeah.
So that means you came here as a baby, basically.
Baby, yeah, exactly.
So, but after coming here, so what have you been doing so far? And of course, you said that your first experience was. Were you also involved in delivering papers?
Yeah.
So yeah, with that and what you have been doing so far, can you just brief? Of course, we'll get into more details about them, but can you just briefly say what?
So I'll brief as possible. So came in, did I guess schooling, kindergarten even, and so in terms of the Sri Lankan context, we'll say being part of that paper delivery, and then going to all the early Sri Lankan events. I think back then, all the stars of the 70s used to come and do the shows here. And then Ami would drag me to all these shows, and me and all the other kids would maybe muck around by Dorothy Winston Center, which the shows are still happening to this day. And so we have like a long history there. And then going through schooling together, uni, and then we get into work, right? And then we're trying to figure out our place as Lankans in New Zealand. So yeah, working, figuring things out. That's where we are now.
So yeah, you define yourself as a Lankan in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So, but as a child of immigrants, how was it for you to adapt to this the New Zealand culture and society? I mean, as a kid, was it easy for you, or was it challenging? And are you satisfied with it so far?
So in terms of adaptation, so there was this moment where I didn't speak because amma tata e Sinhalin kata karana gedara. And then when I'd go to, say, kindergarten, then it's another language. So what happened was I went mute. I went completely mute. And Amma had to get a speech therapist and had to get me to start speaking again. And so maybe, from those earliest times, right, there must have been a bit of confusion. And then even in terms of how you navigate that, when you leave the house, it's a completely different world. And then when you come back in the house, so how you navigate that, and of course when it comes to going to other people's homes and other pansalas and like community events, there are different worlds. But then when you go to your friend's house, that's often then that's a whole nother thing. You're illuminated to like, whoa, what is this, fish and chips on a Friday? So that was pretty funny.
So it's been challenging. So my understanding was that if you're a small child, it could be easier for you to adapt, but it seems you had your own challenges.
Yeah, and also like when you're the only one in the class, you know what I mean? So the only one in the class who's like, so there's a bit more of a lens. Sometimes you may be more of a target for certain types of behavior. And so therefore, all of a sudden you're a little bit more cautious. you'll be more, oh, I have to act in this way, or I better keep myself safe by, you know, behaving in a certain manner.
You mean like trying to fit in?
Yeah, because you look around and you're like, oh no, okay. Yeah.
Were they like bullying because of the appearance?
Yeah, but I think that's, I don't know, like I guess in primary school, yeah. To be frank, yes. Yeah. You try not to think of it too much, but
Yes,
yeah.
Okay, so now when I started this interview, I introduced you as a farmer.
Yes, you did.
I
thought that was really, okay.
Yeah, I said that because I know that you are involved in a community farm. So can you just tell us a little bit more about it? Because how can you also share your experience working with New Zealanders from various cultural and social backgrounds? And can you tell us a little bit about what did you do there?
Yeah. So in terms of, I used to work as a community support worker in mental health. So that was for 3 years across emergency, transitional housing, in mental health as well. So those would be classified as intensive or requiring intensive mental health. And having a caseload and then providing wraparound service. Maybe it's housing, maybe it's connection, food parcels even, whatever people need on the ground. And different cultures, you expose to what, I guess, when it comes to different cultures, cultural kind of like, when I say backgrounds, maybe like a bit of, you don't want to say like historical intergenerational trauma that's maybe led to a certain overrepresentation within certain services, right? It's hard not to notice these things. Now, in terms of like my work with other cultural backgrounds, it was with the Ethnic Women's Trust. So I don't know if people remember the floods that happened, the Auckland anniversary floods. And through that, we heard that there was this institution that needed help called the Ethnic Women's Trust. So we went there. Through that help, there was that connection, the bonding. And then they were like, hey, we got this farm, this garden. And we're like, yeah, we can help out.
So it's managed by ethnic women.
Exactly. So they manage it throughout the week. We provide support in the background with the admin, finances, reporting, funding. Yeah.
And also a bit of farming.
And the thing is, like, the type of farming we do the heavy composting. So I would pick up, like, you know, a few friends, like maybe during the weekend, and then food waste gets dropped off at the top of the hill. Then we bring that down, then we mix it. We have the grass clippings from the local school, and then the mulch from the, I guess, the arborists, and we mix that. Through a few months, that food waste gets turned into soil.
So you said about working in mental health sector. So that's your career.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, as a career, yeah. So look, in terms of my career, like, it's been really ranged. So like, it started off actually at the Port of Auckland in the operations tower. Then I did my graduate diploma in operations and supply chain. Then I got picked up by Chintika Abayawardana, who owns NetLogix. Back then it was a bit of a startup. So I worked in a startup for 3 years in logistics. Then I went into project management at a digital experience agency. Then I went into council as a digital experience analyst. Then I went into mental health. So in terms of career,
you've been changing a lot.
Yeah, I had like varied experience, varied lenses on things. So being able to,
So considering your current work, do you think it's important? Why do you think it's important to address mental health in New Zealand?
In New Zealand? Yeah, it's funny. I think in terms of how, say, things are structured, you know, in terms of, say, people talk about the difference between Langkawi here. And so people say in Langkawi there's a lot more connection, you know, like there's a lot more, say, knowing your neighbor. I remember in Sri Lanka, Atama would give me some random food, then to the next door person. I'm like, what? That would never happen really here, right? And so when it comes to mental health here, when you come from another country, there's that disconnection from everything. How do you address that? And therefore, that's the constant navigation of mental health. I guess it's something that's not talked about. It's very difficult to open up about. People will just say, "Ane, pansalayan, meditation. Me bhavana hundai, me bana hundai." you know. But I guess that it's really good. Those are tools, but then there's an underlying kind of conversation within getting real about mental health as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So getting into more of your connection with the Sri Lankan roots.
Yeah.
So you've been raised in New Zealand and under the Kiwi culture. But what made you connect to your Sri Lankan roots, and what made you curious about exploring your Sri Lankan roots, and why do you think it's important, and why is
Yeah,
it?
I mean, like, to address that question, it's like from the beginning, to say I was raised in the Kiwi culture, nah, like I was raised under the umbrella of a range of uncles and aunties who were family, and so pretty much nurtured by a Sri Lankan culture that was developed here from a very young age. And then when I went into uni, maybe that's when I went more into the Kiwi side, and then wasn't as connected to the Sri Lankan culture side throughout university, those early working days. And then, you know what started it? It was, I got invited to a marae, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei marae. And then they, yeah, so Ngāti Whātua is the iwi, or the Māori tribe within Tāmaki Makaurau, but also all the way up to Dargaville, up north. So that is the iwi within Aotearoa, which is the kind of te reo name for New Zealand. And so when I got invited to this marae, they started, you know, discussing in a completely different sphere. When they ask, who are you? They don't mean your name. What are the villages that you come from? What is your mother's kind of background, your father's background? What are the natural, you know, kanda? Kanda mo kanda? Yeah, yo, what's your mountain? What's the body of water? So then all of a sudden I was like, yeah, I guess, you know, City Father is kind of like close by to Ratnapura. And then Katandola is kind of like, you know, the waters and the waterfalls that we would go, like that Dola. And then it got me thinking in a different way, because from their perspective, they wanted to know what was running through my veins. As in, they would say, those are the things that are you, that's your truth, what runs through your veins. And if you don't know that about you and that history that is carried within that intergenerationally, how can you possibly navigate the future? So then, yeah, that was the beginning.
So they expected you to know your culture before knowing their culture.
Yeah. To them, it's like that's how they will connect with you. Because to them, so there's this term whakapapa, which means layers of inheritance. What are the layers that are within you? It's no accident what is within you. You have to know the history that's led up to you, what's culminated into kind of who you are. What is the energy that you carry? So for me, that's why it's so important to acknowledge all that history that has culminated within my upbringing in New Zealand, all the institutions, say it's New Zealand Sri Lankan Cricket Club, Foundation, USLA, like all of these things, Sri Lanka Ramya Temple, all of these things, it's the tapestry of who I am. And then you go deeper into, say, Amis Gama of like Ratnapura, and then Mirissa. All of these are layers within us. And if you're unable to kind of really connect and weave those elements of yourself, then you're not grounded in who you are. And if you're not grounded in who you are, how could you possibly know the navigation forward?
Speaking of your connections, your exploration of the Sri Lankan culture, I heard that you play traditional drums, and of course,
Learning.
Okay. So I'm sure it's not easy to find a master, a Sri Lankan traditional drum master here. So how did you manage that? How did you learn about drumming? And are there any other Sri Lankan traditions you are exploring at the moment?
Yeah, so it started off with, say, like friends who were, you know, getting married, and they wanted, you know, like maguvera at the at the wedding. And so me and my friend Malit, through YouTube, we managed to, you know, piece something together, right? But the problem is that these are sacred practices. The sacredness of this practice, there's fundamentals to it. There are steps. And for us being here, we were missing a lot of that because there was nobody at that time perhaps here to teach us. And even in terms of balancing, you know, we're all working, we all have our own things going on. And so those initially, it was that. But I've been really lucky to find, you know, Gayan Naya, who's really taken me under his wing and has taken me through those basics, those steps, and taking me through like the rudiments, the basics, and just doing that consistently. And you're connected to the practice. You know, I can't describe that feeling. When you're connected to the practice, you're connected to the better, and that frequency, it's like you're transcending into like a whole nother realm. And so therefore when the padayas, they're, you know, you're really connected in that way when you find that person. And then now like being able to do Udarata steps alongside it. And when you're doing those steps, it's like a different energy. When you're doing kind of like those movements, you're able to connect something within your bones that has always probably been there. It's probably in so many of the kids here growing up. But to be able to authentically connect to it, move with it, and you carry that with you as well. It's quite special. But that element or that lens would have never happened without that being illuminated through that visit to the marae and having that wisdom from Maori people being like, nah, you need to connect to you. Yeah.
So that marae actually opened you up
100%.
to your own culture.
Exactly. So it was the Maori people who kind of like, you know, when they sat me down and they illuminated their lens on things and their concepts, how that can be translated into our own well-being. And that translates very well into like the work that I'm doing now. So I work for a Maori organization who do mental health and housing, and they do like South Asian family harm services, Muslim mental health, Asian mental health. But the way they do these services, it's from a different lens. You know, they look at the spiritual, the family, the physical, you know, like they have these elements of holistic well-being. And even when we do our notes, when we do our case notes, we have to write in those kinds of things. What is the connections? What was the hospitality or the money enhancing approach that you used for that person's self-determination or that person's self-well-being? You know, it's a whole different framing. And that, I guess, is the whole body of knowledge.
Why do you think Sri Lankan children living in New Zealand should learn about Sri Lankan history?
Yeah, because it's something that I never had growing up. And so when you're trying to figure out your place in, as say, having ancestry somewhere else, what I started to find was, well, hang on, what's happening in New Zealand? There's a history there in terms of parallels what happened in Sri Lanka. In terms of the importance, it actually started with the Treaty Principles Bill. So when that was going through Parliament, and then I was wondering, I was like, well, wait, hang on.
You mean the Waitangi?
Yeah, the Waitangi Treaty. So that whole bill, and there was a protest in the march. And I was like, I wonder if there's any Sri Lankan connection here. Then I found out about the Kandyan Convention. And the tactics that were used were very similar around the same time as the treaty, right? And so these concepts of sovereignty, these concepts of treaties, they're not foreign to us. So what's happening here is connected to what happened to us back home. And so then when I dug a bit deeper, then in the 1600s, you had the Dutch coming here at the same time as in Sri Lanka. Then all of a sudden you could document everything and you see the parallel timelines, what was happening in Lanka, exactly what was happening here. And when you have that shared knowledge of history, then you're able to make sense of what is happening currently. And so that was such a good grounding for me that I've only recently discovered. But for me, I'm imagining, well, what if the children here had that same grounding? And it's just knowing your history, knowing the history here, knowing the history back home. Therefore, through that, you're able to see things more clearly. You're able to navigate the future more clearly.
Yeah, so moving on to the next question. You've been, about a few years ago, you went back to Sri Lanka.
Yep.
And so it didn't turn out to be a normal holiday where you would visit the beach or go on a safari and kind of thing, but it turned out to be more like a different experience.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell us about this, and why would you choose that kind of experience during your visit there?
Yeah. Look, so when I go to Sri Lanka, usually I stay at Atama's place, and the routine is we'll wake up around 6 a.m. together, and then I would go and get the patra, the daily mirror, and then I'll maybe get a short eat and then come back, and then Atama. Yeah. And then Atama will be doing like the flowers, and then I would have to do the leftover rice to the squirrels, and then we would do our groceries and cooking. But what happened was, one of my uncles is works for the municipal council, local council, and does all these kind of landscaping jobs around the local area. And so I tagged along with him, and we started doing all these like jobs around these houses, landscaping work essentially. And so started tagging along with all these, picking fruits, cutting grass, trimming branches. And you know what? It was hard work. It was really hard. I thought I could do it because I do a little bit of that work here. It's different.
But
The climate, I was dripping. I was dripping with sweat. I was just like, huh. And then, you get, are you tired? Mahantida. And I was just like, no. I was like, yeah, but I was struggling. And then, of course, you'd have stop off maybe in midday. So you have this hot sour and you just like go like this. Yeah. And then like, next job. So basically that was like my life for like, a couple of weeks while I was in Lanka, just living that. Why? I don't know. Why not? If you're there, just jump into different scenarios, different ways, and you're having a different lens on things.
And did you have any chance to communicate with the municipal workers and maybe learn about their lives?
Well, I guess when I tagged along with uncle, and then they would discuss, like what life was kind of like for them. And in terms of, for me, it was more like observing how they work. So even before climbing a tree to do some work, 1, 2, 3, every time, and then they'll climb. For me, it was like seeing how they worked with nature and how they revered, even in the city, how they revered and had a lens of how they navigated what was around them and how they were connected to it. I think for me, that was the biggest learning for me. Like I was able to just observe, absorb, and help. Oh, and of course, like when you're, at the local store, then you get to know the people, right? And then you're having conversations, and then maybe late at night, there'll be a cricket game on, and then you're seeing everyone coming together on the small TV at the Cyber Kade. And then, I don't know, it was like a little community that was developed, right? That I was a part of. And then to this day, if I do these video calls, with uncle, I'll ask them.
Other things like, now what I've experienced is that, what I've seen is that when some people come, when some Sri Lankans come to New Zealand, some of them intentionally try to disconnect with Sri Lanka, like especially in the youth who are growing up here. I feel that maybe some of them may have some disengagement from their Sri Lankan roots. Do you think this is a healthy scenario? I mean, of course, it's the individual choice whether they should be 100% Kiwis, or maybe they should keep some Sri Lankan in them. But from your experience, what do you think of it? And do you think it's really important that we should? Does it make any sense if we actually still try to connect to our Sri Lankan roots?
I mean, the thing is, like, when it comes to assimilation here, so you're talking about assimilating, right? Assimilating means access to economic opportunity, access to relationships, and I can't deny that I have also been a part of that. You know, it's survival, right? So like the thing is, we look at it in a negative way, but the thing is, for me, it's looking at it from, well, why is it that people would behave in that way? And it's survival. And for me, it's more like acknowledging that. Of course, if you come into another land and then you just want to fit in, because if you don't fit in, then that is in fact a little bit of, you don't want to say like danger, but yeah, it's a disadvantage if you're not assimilated. So therefore, we can't be blaming or putting negative, I guess, layering to that behavior, but it's more like we understand why. However, in terms of, say, the long-term well-being, and I can just talk from my own experience, you think, okay, I'm going to be more Kiwi, quote unquote, but then you get to later in life, and then you realize there's elements that are missing within yourself. What is that? And then you start to make more of an effort to connect with, say, your ancestry and the Lankan kind of culture in that way.
So how is it beneficial for your well-being or your life for that matter?
How is it beneficial? I guess, look, in terms of being just grounded, you know, like it comes down to, when it comes to having a framing or an approach to life, those decisions that we make, if it's not grounded within who you are, all the history, the sacrifice that has culminated into you being here, if it's not grounded in recognizing all of that, that's where perhaps things might go, you don't want to say wayward or anything, but it's not, you want appropriate decision making. You know, the Maori have a saying, tupuna decisions or mokopuna decisions. So that means ancestral or grandchildren. So making decisions based with the visions of grandchildren or based on recognizing your ancestors. So when it comes to making those types of decisions, knowing all that sacrifice that's culminated into this is so important. So therefore connecting to Sri Lanka in that way is important.
So it's more like thinking of the future with the knowledge of the past.
Yeah, kia mua, kia muri. You know, walking backwards. I walk backwards, you know, like as in I'll always look to that past, but walking into the future. You can't possibly make appropriate decisions for the future without truly understanding your past. So that means, you know, knowing the Sri Lankan history all the way back. What were those elements that culminated into us feeling like we had to leave? What were those systems that allowed us to come here? So in the 90s, it was the point system, right? So you have skilled engineers, doctors, those sectors of migrants, immigration. And now it's different. You know, a lot of it's more students, a lot of it's more temporary. And so knowing the systems of immigration, systems of governance that are attached to certain things, and why that is in fact culminated into what we observe in the current landscape of Sri Lankans in New Zealand.
So of course the Sri Lankan diaspora here, they're very engaging. They bring Sri Lankan artists here, they bring Sri Lankan movies here and host Aotearoa and Dancel. But if you look at the broader picture, are we united and engaged as a community? For instance, are we aware of the politics of New Zealand, and are we aware of the political or social effects happening in New Zealand, and are we aware of how it affects us as an ethnic community? Do you think that our engagement in that area, that scope is enough, or do you think we should engage more?
I mean, look, it's always up to within our capacity, you know, so I can't expect someone who is just trying to get by paycheck to paycheck to now say you should engage politically. You know, when it comes to political engagement or within governance, there's a reason why it's those who have perhaps more privilege, more money, who are able to engage in those kinds of topics. But I guess all I can say is, say when it comes to immigration, we'll just take immigration. You know, why is it that, say, if someone comes here, that visa is tied to a single employer? Let's just take that simple decision that's from a government saying, if you come here, your work visa will only be to a single employer. Now that is a government decision that culminates into outcomes of migrant exploitation. As an employer, I know that you're beholden to me through this visa, you know? So it's looking at things just from a dynamics perspective. And that is a deliberate decision, right? So we have this, you know, I'm just taking a very simple case of temporary migrant, work visa, tied to a single employer that culminates into potential migrant exploitation. Now, when it comes to us being able to be engaged in politics, it's political change that can help alleviate the situation. Now, the precedent for that was a lot of the work we did in R21. So during COVID, we did a massive petition, and we managed to get over 150,000 kind of people their residencies. That was political work. That was on the ground petitions. Then we connected with community groups. Then we utilized MPs who were, I guess, favorable to our cause, and they went to the decision-making tables, and then they made it happen. So that was the step-by-step of political engagement that culminated into outcomes for our people, right? And I think that's the thing with politics, is you have to think of it as a way of delivering well-being from a systems level to our community, right? And so that, why I utilize this example, is the most basic example of that needs to change. If you come here on a work visa, you should be able, and you are determined to have the necessary skills this country needs, you should be able to utilize those skills to any employer that needs it. You shouldn't be bonded to one. So when it comes to political engagement, I can't say you should be more politically involved, because that's so dependent on what you're going through. But what I can do is just articulate potential for our future of being politically involved. And I'll always try my best to illuminate the possibilities of being politically involved, the political logistics that create outcomes.
Yeah, you said that engagement with a single employer.
Yeah.
But maybe that could be the only option the person from Sri Lanka coming here have.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And that's why I would never, you know, and even when I engage in this issue, I do it in a way that doesn't put them at risk. You know what I mean? But I always have them in mind, and I'll work alongside groups who are able to do that advocacy in the background and try get these changes through.
That's just one example.
And that's just one example, yeah. There are a whole nother range of legislation, of changes that we try to logistically think of and deliver when it comes to outcomes for our community. That's politics.
All right. To end our conversation, what is your message to our viewers, and I mean, especially the youths and the
Right.
Sri Lankan
Yeah.
diaspora here?
Yeah.
First, some final message here.
Final message? I don't know if I have a final message, but look, I hope, you know, it's useful in terms of like what's being discussed and the lens. All I can say is, throughout my journey, it's been one of navigating and finding that grounding that's helped me. And what's helped me is, from a Maori lens, that's provided me that kind of knowledge, or they say tonga, like treasure of knowledge, of knowing who you are and knowing the deep history that is within you, knowing the scale of sacrifice that has culminated into you being you, will help guide your future. And I hope collectively, if we have that consciousness, we're able to have those collective navigation into our well-being in the Spino and Aotearoa.
Yeah, so that's basically the summary of what we discussed.
Exactly, yeah.
So, Suveen, thank you very much for joining us today with this conversation. And we from Sri Lankans, we'd like to wish you all the very best for your future. Thank you very much.